Hello and welcome to the Celtic Lane morning briefing for Wednesday, the 10th of May. I'm Aidan Macdonald and today I'm joined by Ryan McGinlay. Ryan, how are you?
I'm doing good, mate. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Obviously, plenty to talk about today from different sections of Celtic, which is always enjoyable. First team and a bit of B team stuff that we'll get onto in a bit. Just before we sort of go on to discuss what's been happening, just would encourage anybody who's interested to take a wee look at the ticker tape down the bottom. There's a chance to subscribe to the website, supporting top quality journalism for the club you all love. At the moment, the deal we're doing is £4 for 4 months worth of access, and as part of that, you get big feature interviews from Tony. Recently interviewed people like John Hart and etc. There's a piece on the site today that spoke to Archie McPherson. There's tactical pieces from people like Juco James, and you've also got features from people like myself and Ryan. So get yourself involved if you haven't already. Now, Ryan, in terms of Celtic news, obviously the big one is in the title of this video is discussing the player, not the player of the season, sorry, the team of the season. Now, there was 7 Celtic players in it in total. Obviously, I'll probably just run through the team to start, and then we can just break it down individually. So the team overall is Joe Hart in goals. You've got the back four, Greg Taylor at left back, Carol Starfelt left centre back, Carter Vickers right centre back, Rangers captain James Tavernier at right back. In the midfield, you've got Hatate, you've got Callum McGregor. Then on the right wing, you've got Malik Tillman of Rangers. Left wing, you've got Duke from Aberdeen. And up front, you've got Kyogo and Kevin Van Veen. So, obviously, around 7 players from Celtic in the team, it is quite a lot. I can see in the comments that people are probably thinking it should have been a bit more. I know me and you briefly discussed off air that we probably agreed with that as well, which probably isn't a surprise to a lot of people. But see, obviously, just if we start off with the Celtic players involved, the sort of 7 that are in, I take it you're happy with them all being included in the side?
Absolutely. I think all 7 deserve to be in that team. They've all really contributed well this season to the sort of dominance of domestic football. Especially, I'm really happy, especially to see those 2 centre halves in the team. The 2 of them deserve to both be in together. I would say they're both. I mean, Carter Vickers has been an absolute standout this season, but Carol Starfelt has been so good as well. So it's good to see those 2. And then Greg Taylor's obviously getting the credit that he deserves after a really, really stellar season, especially playing a sort of newer role in that inverted fullback. I know he played it last season, but you're really beginning to see him really thriving in that role. And then the midfield and the forward line sort of speak for themselves. Kyogo deserves to be in there. I think the only sort of absentee that I would say really deserves to be in there is Jota, but 7 out of 11 isn't too bad.
No, it's good that many Celtic players are in there, as they should be. Been the best team in the country by a mile this season. Won the League Cup, won the league. Very good chance of winning a treble. You would expect it to be sort of made up mostly of players from Celtic. I think I agree with what you were saying there. The forward players, with the exception of Jota, that when we come on to in a bit more detail, you would expect. But it was good, in Carter Vickers as well. But it was good to see Greg Taylor and Carl Starfelt in there. 2 players who have been very good this season, particularly Starfelt, maybe doesn't always get the credit he deserves. So I think that was a good wee sort of thing for him to be involved in. It does show you the level he's been at. But we know he's made a few mistakes this season, but nothing major, and he's put in a lot of really solid performances. I know you'd been discussing recently how it's important that he gets his flowers kind of between now and the end of the season, and he might get the chance to do that, given that he's going to be sort of leading experienced centre half and beside Kobayashi. So it was positive to see him involved. Now, in terms of the actual team itself, Jota is probably the sort of main one that people are expecting to be included that he wasn't. 13 goals, 11 assists. Obviously, this is voted for by the players, I believe. They sort of dictate, who's going to be in it. So fellow professionals, they're playing against these players 3, potentially 4 times across the season. Now, they've went for Malik Tillman on the right wing. I don't know what your thoughts are on that. Obviously, we both thought Jota will be in there, but, do you have any reason why players have maybe decided to vote for him over Jota?
I think Malik Tillman has had a good season. You've got to look at the age of 20. He's been a really good young player in the Rangers team, and he probably deserves to be in there. He's been one of their standout players this season. But I can probably see why Jota hasn't made the team, because I feel like he's just started to get his best form now, when for a couple of months he was maybe quite quiet. Yes, he was contributing in terms of goals, but he was more in the defensive end. He was working on things. But yeah, he's had a good season all in. He had a great start to the season and a great finish to the season. I think it's maybe probably the middle that has left him out of the team. But yeah, like I said before, 7 out of 11 isn't too bad. I'm not going to complain about the players that didn't make it into the squad. We've got so many players that we can talk about. So I'd rather talk about their successes than maybe the shortcomings of other players.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair enough. I'd probably just you make a good point in that maybe Jota did dip a wee bit through the middle of the season after a phenomenal start and a really strong end. It looks like he's going to have a really positive contribution across these sort of next 4 league games and hopefully the Scottish Cup final. It would have been good to see him in there, but I can maybe see why they potentially did it. There's always a thing about a wee bit of balance as well. I would argue maybe it doesn't need to be balanced and it should just be the best players across all the positions, but it is what it is. I think in terms of the sort of midfield, Hatate and McGregor, we both would have expected them to be in there, arguably the two best players in Scotland this season. Carter Vickers is obviously, of course, in that discussion. It was obviously probably not a surprise to see them in there, but still good.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the two, Cal McGregor and Rio Hatate, have been absolute standouts this season from start to finish. I mean, both have been out a couple of games with injury as well, but they've been absolute stalwarts in that midfield. They've been so good. And I think one is just as good as the other. Hatate's maybe more sort of flashy in his performances, but McGregor's a metronome in the Celtic team that just keeps us ticking along as the season goes on. So, yeah, I'm delighted for the two of them that they've both made it into the squad.
Yeah, it was great to see. I mean, we know how good McGregor's been this season, Mr. Consistent, and Hatate's been probably taking his game at another level. He's been a wee bit unlucky about injured recently, but I think he's slowly but surely getting back to his best. And maybe like Jota, he's going to just peak between now and end of the season, which is a scary thought when you think about how good he has been at times. In terms of obviously the rest, Duke's always had a good season at Aberdeen over on the left wing. I know people might have been shouting for Maida, etc. And I'm a big fan of Maida, no doubt about that. But I reckon Duke's probably fair enough. He's done well for Aberdeen. Also, they've came on to a game, but at one point they were really struggling. He was still contributing with goals, etc. I think he's been all right. Up front, Kyogo, obviously, top goals to win the league. He had to be in there. If he wasn't up front, you would really need to question what was happening. And he's beside Van Veen, who, to be fair, has had a good season for Motherwell. Once again, a team at one point looked like they were going to get relegated. He's obviously was kind of carrying them, so I think that's fair enough that he's in there. But yeah, overall, 7 players included, and it would have been maybe nice to see a couple more, but as you say, you don't want to get too greedy, and 7's a good shout.
Yeah, seven's a good number to have out of the 11 players. I'm delighted that Keel goes up there again. 30 goals obviously hit this season in all competitions. He deserves to be up there along with Duke and Miovski for Aberdeen have been the main goal getters for Aberdeen in their sort of quest for third place this season. So I think he deserves to be in that squad too. And Van Veen, he speaks for himself. He's one of the top goal scoring Dutch players in the world just now. So he's having a really great season for Motherwell. So another worthy sort of inclusion into the top 11.
Yeah, I don't think we can begrudge those 2 players in particular being involved. I think most fans that, if you've watched kind of maybe a bit of Scottish football outside of Celtic this season, would probably agree with that. Or even in the games against us, you've seen Van Veen's goal recently at Parkhead, took it really well. Sort of guy you only really need to give one chance to, and he's been vital for Motherwell, sort of turning them from relegation fodder really at one stage to potentially just missing out in top 6. So yeah, I think that was fair enough. In terms of the women's PFA Scotland Team of the Year was also actually just announced not long before we came on air. So in that, Jacinta's involved from a Celtic point of view, as well as Caitlin Hayes. Obviously, Caitlin Hayes this season scored a lot of important goals for Celtic. There was a late equaliser against Rangers in the 1-1 draw a couple of months ago, I think it was. And then another late winner against Hibs in the last game, which I know you and Tony touched on yesterday. That could be vital come between the end of the season of Celtic to be successful. Were you happy to see them in there? And did you think maybe anybody else should have been included from a Celtic point of view?
It was really good to see them included in the Team of the Year. I know they were both in last year, so it's good that they've kept up that sort of consistency. And that'll be great for the team going into Thursdays. It's a wee bit of added motivation. Those 2 players will obviously be looking to make an impact against Glasgow City on Thursday night. So, yeah, a wee bit of added motivation for the two. And hopefully more players are involved next season.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, obviously we have kind of discussed how it is probably going to be difficult for Celtic to win the league now, even if they do beat Glasgow City. And tomorrow, sorry, it is, isn't it? Because they would also be relying on Glasgow City then losing to Rangers as well. And obviously when you're relying on other teams, it can always become a bit difficult. It's not over, but it definitely was a missed opportunity in that last game against Rangers. But no, both players deserve to be in there. They've both produced a lot of big moments. And like you say, 2 years in a row, that shows their individual consistency. Just while we're on the topic of sort of players and improvement, I know, Ryan, obviously you did a piece yesterday. It went out as a newsletter and it's now on the site as an article today, talking about how the evidence is basically showing that despite how successful Celtic have been under Ange, the players are still getting better and it looks like they're only continue to improve. I don't know if you want to maybe just talk the commenters through that briefly, because I know it is a wee bit stats based. I put that in the description for anybody that wants to have a wee look.
Yeah, it was one of the first sort of analytical pieces I'd done for the website. It was basically looking at StatsBomb radars to see players that have done well in both seasons and how they've both, in both respective seasons, how they've improved. So looking at those radars was really interesting to see specific stats and where players have improved in their second season. I think one of the most impressive ones was looking at Hatate's radar in particular, which has skyrocketed in 2 seasons, which I think you can probably put down to the fact that he's had a full pre-season to sort of work in Ange Postecoglou's side, and you're seeing the real fruits of that now. His progressive movements into the final third have went up by 4 in the second season, so it really does show how much of an improvement he's made. Probably he's just maturing as a footballer as well at the age of 25. I know he's 25, but he's a young 25 because he was in obviously the university system in Japan. So they're seeing a real blossoming player under Ange Postecoglou's system, and hopefully we can keep him for another couple of years to see him improve even more. In terms of other players that have improved, Starfelt is making less mistakes in the team. You can see that in the stats. His passing accuracies went up as well. So it shows a real sort of maturity in Ange Postecoglou's system. It shows an improvement in the defensive end of things as well as attacking, which is what you would probably associate his teams with. But it shows that defensively there are improvements as well being made in the team. So that's great to see as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, as you've touched on there, we know how good the team are going forward, and there was a lot made about that before Ange got the job. But I don't like over old ground, but this sort of thing about games are going to end like 5-5-4, 6-5 or whatever. It's not really been the case, particularly this season. There's been the odd match. I discussed it in my article that I did the other day, talking about the sort of 8 results that clinched the league. There was a 4-3 at Tynecastle. 3-2 against Rangers recently, and there was also the 4-2 game against Dundee United at home. And they've also kind of been a wee bit back and forth, but really outside of that, it's mostly just been, to be honest, across the season, comfortable performances or wins for Celtic, with the exception of that St Mirren defeat, obviously. So I think they've definitely improved at the back, and you can see Ange makes a lot about defending from the front, etc., doesn't he? So, and the fact that you were able to see that improvement in Starfelt, I think was a really big thing, because we know how good Carter Vickers is. He's been phenomenal, but seeing that Starfelt's also improving at his age, it is really positive to see. Just when we're also on the topic of stats and defenders, I'm just going to put in the chat now. Hopefully it's going to load. Draco James did a piece, he filed it yesterday, but it's went on the site today, discussing how StatsBomb, they've recently released a new performance metric. It's called Heading Orientated Performance System. Basically measuring how good players are in the air, the aerial duels that they get involved in, all that sort of thing. And he discusses, how that could be beneficial as a sort of metric for Celtic going forward. He also touches on it could be something maybe used to recruit players in the transfer market. Maybe not so much under Ange, but potentially under future managers who maybe are playing with the ball maybe a bit higher up the park. So you get yourself involved in that if that's something that interests you. Now, in terms of moving on to just what else we're going to talk about, Roberto Martinez, he praised Jota quite in a quite detailed fashion when he was recently interviewed. Now, it was a charity dinner, I believe he was at, and he sort of I think it was somebody put it to him about, Jota's potential prospects of getting involved in the Portugal national team. So when he was asked about it, he said, I think Jota is a player that's very important for the national team in terms of the qualities that he has. He's a player that has this natural knack of beating individuals in a 1v1 situation. So he's a player that since I arrived in January, which is when he got the Portugal job, As you can imagine, there's been a lot of information. Tried to follow as many players, in fact, all the players, and clearly Jota is one of them. What I would say is that his evolution has been very impressive. I would say that the last 4 months, especially, he's going into a very mature role at his club. He's always involved in the big moments, and that's important. He's very much a player that we appreciate what he can bring to the national team. Now, based off those comments, we know how strong the Portugal squad is. Tony, Sean, and I discussed at the time before the World Cup when Jota was named in that sort of massive provisional squad. I think it was about like 45 players or something. How, despite being involved in that, it was going to be quite unlikely that he was included overall. I think Tam Max also putting it was the Beatson Cancer Charity Night Aidan Martinez was involved in. And we mentioned at the time how it was going to be quite difficult for him to break into that squad. You know, the quality players they've got in terms of forwards, you know, slash wingers. Ronaldo, obviously, is, you know, Bernardo Silva, players of that calibre. While Felix, it's not going to be easy to get involved in that. But obviously, since then, the Portugal manager's moved on. Martinez has came in. And I think his comments show there that he has been impressed by Jota. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I think it helps that Martinez he's obviously got a couple of links to Scottish football as well. I remember him; he was playing for Motherwell back in the day, so it shows that he'll have that sort of mutual understanding of Scottish football as well, and he'll watch players. Obviously, the left wing and right wing are going to be so difficult for Jota to break into. Portugal are absolutely blessed with loads of good Portuguese talent. You look at even, I know you get Ronaldo that can play out there, Bernardo Silva, but also Rafael Leao who plays for Milan. So it's a really stacked position for him to break into. But I think these comments show that he's moved to. I tweeted about this earlier that he's moved to Celtic has already been vindicated. The fact that he's getting international recognition from his new manager, it definitely bodes well for the future that he has in Martinez's thoughts. And yeah, hopefully he does break into the squad. I couldn't think of many better things than seeing a Portuguese winger playing for Celtic and playing for the Portuguese national team. That would be another great feather in the cap of Ange Postecoglou, and it would show that Celtic is a place where you can sort of enhance and increase and boost your international prospects as well as your individual prospects in the team. I would absolutely love to see that at Celtic, and it would show that there isn't a stagnation when you come to Celtic on your international career. You can still make it in your international team. So I would really like to see that for Jota, and I think his hard work would deserve it.
Yeah, I think there's quite a good point that you touch on when you're saying that it shows that playing for Celtic's not a barrier for getting involved, or it would show that playing for Celtic's not a barrier for being involved with a top international team, you know, a team right at the top that can potentially win World Cups, European Championships. If Jota was to get a cap, or potentially several caps while he was at Celtic, that would be massive, probably one of the biggest stories kind of out of Scottish football for a while. It would be really great to see that. And yeah, look, Jota's been phenomenal this season, as I touched on earlier. 13 goals, 11 assists, and he is up against tough competition in that position. But I reckon if he was to maybe go and have another strong Champions League campaign for his next season, he obviously scored a couple of goals this campaign, would be even more influential. That's potential against some big teams. That's when all the eyes are on you. So if he's able to do that, then I think that's going to give him the best chance of being involved in potentially World Cup qualifying squads where maybe Martinez is going to want to try something a wee bit different. I don't think when they're going into Euro 2024 next year, I don't think anybody's going to begrudge of, even if Jota had been involved, that he's suddenly, you know, starting ahead of somebody like Bernardo Silva, who we know is amazing. Rafael Leao, who I forgot about, phenomenal player for AC Milan, you know, playing that Champions League semi-final tonight. Players of that sort of level, I don't think anybody's expecting Jota to be unseating them. But if he's involved in a squad in the near future, it would be even being involved in a sort of starting squad, like 25 would be a step, and then potentially a cap. It would be a great position and something that Celtic could use to sort of advertise to maybe younger players in big clubs, or not big clubs, but like, you know, sort of clubs that we wouldn't usually be able to afford players that are prime from. Younger, saying if you come and play for us 2-3 years, you know, there's a chance that you can also be involved at the top level for your country. So no, it's positive comments. It'll be interesting to see where it goes. Probably something to keep an eye on. I know there's a national break coming up at the end of the season. That window's probably a wee bit too soon, but you know, next season there'll be World Cup qualifiers, sorry, Euros qualifiers, you know, Nations League games and that. So it's worth keeping a wee eye on, see if he's involved. In terms of what else we're going to discuss, also it's a Glasgow Cup final tonight. I've seen a few commenters mentioned that. That's obviously it's a big game. Celtic B's playing Rangers B at Ibrox. So live on YouTube. I think it's 7 o'clock it starts at. So no fans as far as I'm aware. It's like similar to the Youth Team Cup final. Players as family, friends, etc. There'll be some representatives from each club obviously as well. But that'll be an interesting one, Ryan. Obviously Celtic B had a positive season in the Lowland League. I think it was third they finished. So a strong sort of campaign they've been involved in, the UEFA Youth League as well. I think it was challenging the UEFA Youth League, but good development, playing against Real Madrid, Leipzig, Shakhtar, etc. It's been a sort of pretty positive. Everything that we've also been kind of dipping in and out of the B team stuff across the season, and they've had some positive results. They beat Rangers at Ibrox relatively recently, beat them quite a few times across the season. To be fair, that match at Celtic Park just before Christmas. So this is obviously an opportunity for them to get some silverware, which would be great to see, wouldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely would. And do you know, I think it's been a really positive season, both when you look at the sort of tables, the final table, finishing third is a good result for the B team. But the way that the team is playing, I went and watched them a couple of times. I watched them against East Kilbride at the K Park a couple of months ago. And they really are trying hard under Steve McManus and Darren Day respectively to play Ange Postecoglou's sort of style of play. It is good to see that getting filtered through into the B team, because it will show and it will help players that do make the step up into the first team that they can make that adjustment pretty early. Because last season, I remember under Tommy McIntyre, they were playing a brand of football. It was maybe a tiny bit like Ange Postecoglou, but it wasn't the same. So even making that adjustment would be difficult, because it'd be a completely different style of play. But now that they're playing this sort of samey sort of style the first team is playing, then it should make the adjustment a wee bit easier for them coming up into the first team. You're seeing that with guys coming into the team, Rocco Vata, Ben Summers. That adjustment's easier for them now. So yeah, it has been a really impressive season for the B team, and I'm just hoping that we see more and more results in terms of first team players coming through the team in the next couple of years. But so far so good, I would say, in terms of that streamlining sort of strategy that we're doing just now. It seems to be working so far.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think it would be a good way to cap off the season. Obviously, Celtic, even if they had finished top of the Lowland League, there wasn't the option to get promoted or go into or win the league, I should say, then go into the Highland League playoff and then potentially League Two. It would have went to whoever was second if that had been the case. But I think it would be a nice way to cap off the season if they were to get a trophy, particularly clinching it at Ibrox as well would always be nice. Obviously, in this Glasgow Cup, it was a bit of a round robin format at the start. Celtic were in, well, the only other remaining teams in Partick Thistle and Queen's Park. Celtic have won pretty much all their games, including beating Rangers. I think they played that at Rangers' training centre. It was a closed door game as well. Then they beat Partick Thistle recently in the semi-final before this match. So I think Rangers won the competition last year, so being able to beat the holders as well would be nice. And I think it would be a good reward for Darren O'Day, Stephen McManus, and all the players that have put a bit of effort in. I know we've touched on before potentially some of the B team players getting involved with the team before now and end of the season. That might be something we come on to discuss in a wee bit more detail after the Rangers game this weekend, because it will then be 3 matches before the cup final where Ange might want to rest some players going into the Scottish Cup final. So that could be something that potentially happens, and this would be another good platform for the team to go out and do well. But yeah, it's always good to potentially see Celtic win a trophy against Rangers. So 7 p.m. on Celtic's YouTube channel tonight, I think it is. If the commenters or any other people watching are wanting to tune in. Now, Ryan, in terms of just other things to touch on, I suppose, before we finish up, there was also like comments from Joe Hart. Tony had been at his presser on Sunday. It was embargoed, released last night. He was also sort of discussing how much he's loving playing for Ange. Now, some of the comments were things we've heard before. He was also discussing, how he loves playing a certain way. But there was a comment he was talking about how he loves sort of the fact that Celtic live and die by the fact they basically need to win every game. He's also used to the winning mentality, particularly at the start of his career when he was at Manchester City, playing in Champions League semi-finals, winning Premier Leagues, FA Cups, League Cups. There was also the start that was floating about recently saying that Joe Hart could be the only second ever Celtic player to win everything in England and everything in Scotland if Celtic win the Scottish Cup. The other one being Kenny Dalglish. So it would be interesting if he was able to achieve that. Also, it would be, imagine, satisfying for him. It's probably a rare start that isn't going to come up anytime soon outside of Joe Hart. So I don't know if you had a chance to look at his comments. He was also talking positively about Ange. There was a wee bit of comparison I think he mentioned about Pep as well, just in terms of the passing out from the back thing. But it just shows you how much Joe Hart's enjoying himself, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. He's worked under some great managers in the past. We talk about Pep Guardiola, Roberto Mancini, Manuel Pellegrini. There's loads of examples of good managers that he's worked under. Really, really high praise towards Ange Postecoglou. It really does show you the mutual respect that Joe Hart has for Ange Postecoglou. And obviously, it's been the same back. Ange has talked about Joe Hart's leadership qualities in the past numerous times. Really, really high praise. And I think, just in general, I think that move last season has just been perfect for both parties. I mentioned this a couple of times before, but Joe Hart he needed somewhere to sort of revitalise his career. He was sitting on the bench for Burnley and in Tottenham, respectively. He needed somewhere where he could go and play first team football and win trophies, just to stack up his sort of individual and collective honours, sort of trophy cabinet. You would say his very own trophy cabinet, and he's definitely added to that in the year or so that he's been, year or 2 years that he's been here. Yeah, for Celtic needed a stable goalkeeper after the sort of shenanigans that we had in the 2021 season. We needed somebody that was going to play 40, 50 games and be that sort of rock in the back in the last line of defence. And yeah, it's worked out tremendously. Yeah, he's made a couple of mistakes here and there, and he's not the greatest with the ball at his feet, but he keeps the ball out of the net, and his numbers are really, really good for Celtic. So yeah, I think it really has worked out for both parties, and I think he's really, really enjoying it. You can see from his comments that he's enjoying every minute of being a Celtic player and winning trophies and getting this sort of run of trophies in the twilight of his career. So yeah, it's been a really good move for all parties, I would say.
Yeah, I've definitely been positive. I think at the time, I was maybe a wee bit sceptical about Joe Hart coming in. I know Tony sort of kind of expressed that opinion as well. Just not that we didn't think he was a good goalkeeper, we'd seen him, but just could he actually still perform to a standard? Now, we know he's got deficiencies in terms of kicking the ball out from his feet. Joe Hart's admitted that himself. There was obviously the interview after the Leipzig game away from home in Europe where he addressed that, but in terms of like actual shot stopper, I think he's sort of equipped himself relatively well. And you make a good point talking about after this. It was his first point. We had 1 point. We had three goalkeepers had the number 1 jersey in the season before. I think it was Barkas, Bain, and Connor Hazard. None of them put in a really good enough performance. So he had to come in. Ange had made that a priority after that Champions League qualifier when Barkas sort of threw the ball in the net. He knew that he had to get somebody in that could do a job, and Joe Hart's came in and done that. He's obviously got another year left on his deal. There's maybe a wider discussion to be had whether or not Celtic are going to go in the market for a goalkeeper in the summer. That's probably something we'll debate once the season's over. Probably quite a lot, to be honest. But I reckon that in terms of between now and the end of the season, everybody's pretty happy with Joe Hart involved. And for the next campaign, even if Joe Hart was not to be number 1, you'd still want somebody with his leadership skills around the dressing room, wouldn't you?
Yeah, it's such a cliche, but you can never have too many leaders in the dressing room, and Joe Hart's certainly one of them. He's been there, done that, bought the t-shirt, done it at the highest level down south. I remember in particular watching him against, I think he was playing for Man City against Borussia Dortmund. He kept Man City in the tie. He's just one of those goalkeepers that can just make saves out of nowhere. I think he's seen that even recently in the semi-final game against Rangers. I thought he had one of his best games for Celtic, making big saves in order to keep the score down and to get us to win the game in the process. So he's got a really important role in that team because he's not always busy, especially domestically. When he has 1 or 2 chances, he needs to be awake, alert and alive to sort of get down to shots, and he does that. I just think it's been a great fit. Yes, I know we'll probably talk about how we can potentially strengthen in that position in the summer, maybe get a younger goalkeeper who's better with the ball at his feet. Younger goalkeeper can be maybe a 25, 26-year-old. Goalkeepers last until they're 40 nowadays. But I think just now Joe Hart is absolutely fine in that position. I don't see why we should change that. I think he should get as many appearances as he can for Celtic and then be one of the ones to lift the trophy or trophies at the end of the season, potentially.
Yeah, obviously Joe Hart, he's somebody that's buying in. He's bought into the club, I should say, massively. We've also discussed recently players like Jota, but Joe Hart's right up there. You can see how much he's enjoying it. And that interview he did before the game at the weekend, in which he was discussing how, he wants to be part of a team that's fighting. That's what motivates him, and he's going to get exactly that. So no, I'm more than happy with Joe Hart till the end of the season. As we mentioned, was a discussion maybe to be had in the summer, but he's equipped himself really well, and he's been a good sign. I think, Ryan, to be honest, that's us pretty much covered everything in terms of today. Once again, if anybody's wanting to watch a sort of Glasgow Cup game involving Celtic B and Rangers B at Ibrox tonight, I'll be on Celtic's YouTube from 7 p.m, I think, so get yourself involved in that if that's something that interests you. Before we go, just anybody that's interested or encouraging, maybe have a wee look at the ticker tape down below. Chance to support, top quality journalism for the club you love. £4 for 4 months is the current deal we're on, and you can find out a wee bit more about that at www.celticway.co.uk/subscribe. Ryan, thanks very much for joining us, mate. Always a pleasure.
Thank you very much for having me. Always a pleasure to talk about Celtic.
You and Tony will be back tomorrow, I believe, to sort of break down the Celtic women preview, I should say, the Celtic women v Glasgow City match, among other things. So we'll see you tomorrow, guys. Cheers.